Story 1. Everyone told me the desert highways were the safest places to drive at night. The emptiness was a comfort, they said. You could see headlights from miles away. They never considered what you might see when there shouldn't be any headlights at all. Leah had chosen the night drive across the Utah salt flats deliberately. The stark, moonlit landscape under a canopy of infinite stars was a balm after the claustrophobic intensity of the city. Her compact SUV hummed steadily, the only sound for miles except for the constant whisper of wind against her windows. The dashboard clock glowed 2:17 a.m. She was alone in a beautiful, geometric emptiness. An hour into the flats, a pinprick of light appeared in her rearview mirror. It was far enough back that she didn't register it as a threat, just another soul cutting through the night. But over the next 20 minutes, the light didn't change. It didn't grow larger or smaller. It simply persisted, a constant, unblinking eye in the darkness behind her. She adjusted the speed experimentally, slowing from 75 to 65. The light maintained its exact distance. A prickle of unease traced its way down her spine. She accelerated back to 80, gripping the wheel. The light kept pace, neither gaining nor falling back. Then it began to flicker. It wasn't the pattern of a turn signal, it was erratic, a rapid stuttering flash of bright and dark. Like a faulty bulb or a deliberate signal, it continued for a full minute, then stopped, returning to its steady, distant glow. Leah's mouth went dry. She reached for her phone on the passenger seat. No service. Of course. She was in the dead heart of the flats. The light started flickering again, this time in a different rhythm. Short, long, short. It felt intentional, like code. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She focused on the road ahead, searching for an exit, a rest area, anything. There was only the arrow-straight asphalt and the crushing emptiness. The next time the flickering started, it was faster, more aggressive. The light behind it also seemed to be getting brighter, closer. She checked the mirror and her breath caught. There were two lights now, not the paired headlights of a single vehicle, but two distinct, separate points of light, riding side by side. Impossible. She pressed the accelerator, the SUV surging forward to 90, then 95. The wind's whisper became a roar. The twin lights kept their perfect distance, their synchronized flickering now a constant, frantic strobe that painted the interior of her car in jarring pulses of white light. Terror seized her. This wasn't a truck. This wasn't a person. This was something else, something that defied the simple rules of the road she understood. Then, as suddenly as it began, the flickering stopped. The lights vanished. Leah drove on, her body trembling, her eyes darting between the road and her mirrors. For 10 minutes, there was nothing but blessed darkness. She allowed herself a shaky breath, her hands aching from their grip on the wheel. A new light appeared ahead, not behind her, ahead. It was a single, bright point hovering just above the road surface a mile or so in the distance. It wasn't the headlight of an oncoming car. It was stationary, suspended in the air. As she drew closer, the details resolved. It was a lantern, an old-fashioned gas lantern sitting neatly on the center line of the highway, and standing beside it was a figure, silhouetted against the glow, one arm raised, palm out, in a clear signal to stop. Leah didn't slow down. She swerved into the oncoming lane, her tires thumping over the rumble strips, and flew past the figure and the lantern. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She didn't stop driving until the sun rose and she saw the green welcome sign for a small Nevada town. At a crowded truck stop diner, over coffee she couldn't hold steady. She told a waitress she'd had a scary experience on the flats. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, just nodded. The long night drivers see things out there, she said, refilling Leah's cup. Lights that follow. Some say it's the old railway workers, still walking their routes. Others say it's the desert itself, letting you know you're not as alone as you think. Leah never drove the salt flats again, day or night. And sometimes, when she sees a single, distant light in the darkness, her heart seizes with a cold, specific fear, not of what is there, but of what might be waiting for her to stop. Story 2. I used to love the freedom of a long drive. Now I know that freedom is an illusion. The road doesn't set you free, it just exposes how fragile your safety really is. Marco's cross-country move was supposed to be a new beginning. The U-Haul trailer hitched to his sedan was packed with everything he owned. The plan was to drive from Boise to Minneapolis in 3 days, sticking to the interstate. But a major accident had closed I-90, and his GPS had rerouted him onto a state highway that cut through the dense pine forests of Montana. The road was narrow and winding, the tall trees creating a tunnel that blocked out the late afternoon sun. According to the map, it was a 70-mile stretch with no services. He settled in, podcasts queued up to pass the time. After about 30 miles, he saw the first one. A child's toy, a red fire truck, placed perfectly in the center of the shoulder. It was oddly pristine, not weathered or broken. Marco thought nothing of it, assumed it had fallen from a car. 10 minutes later, he saw another. A stuffed brown bear, sitting upright against a mile marker post as if waiting for a bus. Its plastic eyes seemed to catch his headlights. That one felt intentional. The unease grew with each mile. A little porcelain doll in a blue dress, positioned on a guardrail. A wooden rocking horse facing the road. They were all different, but shared an unsettling cleanliness, placed with deliberate care in the vast, empty landscape. He checked his phone. No signal. The podcast had ended, and the silence in the car felt heavy, oppressive. The only sound was the hum of his engine and the wind rushing past. Then he saw the man. 100 yards ahead, a figure stood on the shoulder, his back to the road. He was tall and wore a dark green jacket. As Marco approached, the figure didn't turn or react. He just stood there, perfectly still, staring into the wall of trees. Marco's foot hovered over the brake, but instinct told him not to stop. He swerved slightly into the oncoming lane to give the man a wide berth. As he passed, he risked a glance. The man was older, with a gaunt, weathered face. He wasn't looking into the trees. He was looking at a small, perfectly arranged collection of toys at his feet. And he was smiling. A cold dread washed over Marco. He accelerated, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The man remained motionless, receding into the distance. 5 miles later, his heart still thudding, Marco saw the flash of brake lights ahead. A station wagon was pulled over, its hazard lights blinking. A woman stood by the open driver's side door, frantically waving her arms. Relief flooded him. Another person. He slowed and pulled up behind her, rolling down his window. "My daughter," the woman cried, her voice strained with panic. "She ran into the woods after a rabbit. It's her pet. She got the carrier open at the last rest stop. Please, can you help me? I can't find her." Marco's instincts screamed again. The story was too strange, too convenient. He looked past the woman into the station wagon. It was empty. On the back seat, he saw a small, open animal carrier and a single, clean, red fire truck. "I'll go for help," Marco said, his voice tight. He put the car in drive and pulled around her, ignoring her pleading shouts that turned into something else, a guttural sound of frustration that didn't seem human. He drove, his knuckles white, pushing the sedan and its heavy trailer faster than was safe on the curving road. In his rear view, he saw the woman's headlights come on, but she didn't follow. He didn't stop driving until he reached a gas station at the junction with the next major highway. He sat in his car, shaking, for a long time. He never reported it. What would he say? That a woman with a story about a lost child and a rabbit had tried to lure him into the woods? That she had the same toys as the silent, smiling man? Marco finished his drive to Minneapolis, but he sold everything in the U-Haul trailer the moment he arrived. He couldn't bear to look at it. He still doesn't know what the toys meant, or what was waiting for him in those Montana pines. He only knows that on some roads, the shoulder isn't a safe place to pull over. It's a stage, and someone else is directing the play. Story 3. They say you should never ignore a gut feeling. My gut feeling told me to run the second I saw the diner. But the storm was too strong, and the night was too long. Elara was fleeing a life that had become suffocating. The details didn't matter now. All that mattered was the road ahead and the storm behind her. A torrential downpour had reduced visibility to zero, forcing her off the interstate somewhere in rural Kansas. Her wipers beat a frantic, useless rhythm against the sheets of water. Through the blur, a soft glow appeared, a neon sign spelling EAT in faded pink letters. A single-story diner, its windows steamy and warm, stood like a mirage in the drowning darkness. It was the only sign of life for miles. Grateful, she pulled into the gravel lot, her car crunching to a halt beside one other vehicle, an old pickup truck. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of grease and coffee. A counter with red vinyl stools ran the length of the room, and a few wooden booths lined the walls. An elderly couple sat in one booth, not speaking, slowly eating pie. A trucker in a cap was at the counter, hunched over a mug. A waitress with a kind, tired face looked up from wiping the counter and gave Alara a small smile. "Rough night to be out," the waitress said, gesturing for her to sit anywhere. Alara took a booth, shrugging off her wet jacket. She ordered coffee and a burger, her body beginning to unclench in the warmth. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. It was the silence that got to her first. The rain was a roar outside, but inside the quiet was profound. The elderly couple ate without a single word passing between them. The trucker never looked up from his mug. There was no clatter from the kitchen, no radio playing classic hits. Her coffee arrived. It was lukewarm and tasted faintly of metal. She took one sip and set it down. The waitress lingered. "Traveling far?" "Just passing through," Alara said, her guard going up. "Not many people just pass through here," the waitress replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Most folks who stop, they end up staying a while." A chill that had nothing to do with the storm crept down Alara's spine. She glanced at the other patrons. The elderly couple were now looking directly at her, their expressions blank. The trucker had turned slightly on his stool, and she saw his eyes were empty, devoid of any spark of curiosity or life. She stood up, pulling out her wallet. "You know, I think I'll just take the coffee to go. The storm's letting up." The waitress's smile vanished. "The storm isn't letting up. It's just getting started. Sit down. Your burger will be ready soon." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Alara looked at the door. It seemed 1,000 miles away. The trucker had stood up, blocking the path to the exit. He was a large man, his movements slow and deliberate. "I said I'm leaving," Alara insisted, her voice trembling. "You can't," the waitress said simply. "No one leaves until the storm passes, and this storm, it never really passes." Alara's fight-or-flight response, dormant from exhaustion, roared to life. She didn't think. She grabbed her heavy travel mug and threw the lukewarm coffee directly into the trucker's face. He roared in surprise, clawing at his eyes. She didn't wait. She bolted, shoving past the waitress and yanking the diner door open. The storm wind howled in, whipping rain across the room. She didn't look back. She sprinted to her car, fumbling with the keys, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. She peeled out of the gravel lot, spraying stones, and didn't dare slow down until the diner's glow was swallowed by the darkness and rain behind it. She drove through the night, the storm raging around her, too terrified to stop. At dawn, exhausted and shivering, she found a chain hotel in a large town. The clerk at the front desk was cheerful and normal. As Alara checked in, the clerk's smile faltered. "Hey, you have a little something on your jacket," the clerk said, pointing. Alara looked down. Pinned to the lapel of her jacket, where it had certainly not been before, was a small, white name tag. It read in clean printed letters, "Ilara." The style was identical to the one the waitress had been wearing. She never went back to Kansas. She sometimes wonders about the other people in that diner. Elderly couple, the trucker, were they once travelers like her who just needed to wait out a storm? She still has the name tag. She keeps it in a drawer, a cold, hard reminder that some places aren't refuges. They are traps, baited with warmth and light, waiting for the next lost soul to wander in from the storm. Story foiled. My brother used to joke that the desert at night was a blank slate. You could project anything onto it. The problem is, you never know what might be projecting back. Ben was a photographer, chasing the perfect shot of the Perseid meteor shower. He'd driven deep into the Arizona backcountry, far from the light pollution of the towns, until he found a lonely pull-off overlooking a vast, empty basin. The air was cool and silent, the sky a breathtaking tapestry of stars. He set up his tripod and camera, the only sounds the clicking of his equipment and the occasional crunch of his boots on gravel. For the first hour, it was perfect. Meteors streaked across the sky in brilliant, silent flashes. He lost himself in the work, the rhythm of the long exposures, a soothing meditation. It was during one of these 30-second exposures that he saw it, a brief, faint light down in the basin. It wasn't a meteor, it was ground level, a quick pulse of white that vanished as soon as it appeared. He dismissed it. A trick of the eyes, a reflection, maybe a distant car. But 10 minutes later he saw it again. Same place. This time it pulsed twice. He squinted into the darkness, but the basin was a pool of ink. His camera, however, was still collecting light. When the exposure finished, he reviewed the image on the camera's LCD screen. The sky was streaked with star trails and a bright meteor, but the foreground, the basin that should have been pure black, was not. In the photograph, the entire floor of the basin was covered in a grid of hundreds of dim, glowing points of light, like a sprawling subterranean city seen through a veil of dirt. And in the center of the grid was a single, brighter, blindingly white dot. Ben's blood ran cold. He looked up from the screen into the actual basin. Nothing but darkness. He looked back at the photo. The grid was still there, clear and undeniable. He took another photo, a 1-minute exposure, pointed directly at the spot. He held his breath as the timer counted down. The result was the same, the grid, the central point, a geometric pattern that spoke of something vast and intelligent and utterly hidden. Then, a new light appeared, not in the photo but in reality, a single, bright white light moving. It was coming from the basin, following the rough track of a dirt road he hadn't noticed before. It was moving toward him. Ben's professional curiosity evaporated, replaced by a primal fear. He scrambled to collapse his tripod, his hands shaking so badly he fumbled the locks. The light was getting closer, climbing the gentle slope from the basin floor. It wasn't bobbing like a vehicle on a rough road. It moved with a smooth, relentless, mechanical precision. He threw his equipment into the passenger seat, not caring if it broke, and started the car. He flipped a U-turn, his headlights sweeping across the desert, and for a single, horrifying second, illuminating the source of the light. It was no vehicle he could recognize. It was a silent, dark, geometric shape, featureless except for the single blinding white light at its front. He drove until he reached a 24-hour truck stop, his heart still trying to beat its way out of his chest. He pulled the memory card from his camera, desperate for proof, for validation. He slotted it into his laptop. Every single photograph from after the first sighting was corrupted. The files were nothing but gray, digital static. The grid, the city of lights, the strange craft, all gone. The only remaining images were the early, pristine shots of the meteor shower, taken before he noticed anything was wrong. Ben never went back to that pull-off. He still photographs the night sky, but he never reviews his shots until he's home, surrounded by lights and people. And he always has the unnerving feeling that the blank slate of the desert is never truly blank. It's just waiting for the right kind of camera to see what's really there. Story 5. They tell you to trust your GPS. They never tell you what to do when your GPS starts trusting something else. Lena was moving her grandmother from a remote farm in Missouri to a retirement community in St. Louis. The old farmhouse, emptied of a lifetime of memories, felt hollow and sad. It was well past midnight when she finally locked the door for the last time, her small sedan packed with the last of the photo albums and fragile heirlooms. Exhausted, she plugged a phone into the car charger and set the navigation for home. The first hour was fine, familiar state highways under a clear, starry sky. Then her GPS instructed her to turn onto County Road 17, a narrow, unlit ribbon of asphalt that cut through dense, sleeping farmland. Recalculating, the electronic voice said cheerfully, "This route is 12 minutes faster." Lena was too tired to question it. She turned. The road was worse than she expected, potholed and lined with ditches full of stagnant water. The fields on either side were pitch black, the farmhouses set far back from the road, their windows dark. After 20 minutes, the GPS told her to turn left. The road it indicated wasn't paved. It was a gravel track, barely wide enough for her car, leading into a copse of trees. Recalculating, the voice said again, "Continue for 2 miles." A knot of unease tightened in Lena's stomach. This felt wrong. She pulled over and tried to check her phone's map, but the screen flickered, the signal bar empty. She was about to turn around when she saw headlights approaching from behind. A wave of relief washed over her. Another car. Maybe they knew the way. She waited for it to pass, but it didn't. It was a large, boxy van, its paint color indistinguishable in the dark. It slowed to a crawl as it passed it, then stopped about 50 feet ahead, its brake lights glowing like malevolent eyes. It just sat there, blocking the narrow road. Lena's relief curdled into fear. She put her car in reverse, intending to back it to the main highway. She looked in her rearview mirror. Another set of headlights was there, pulling up close behind her, boxing her in. Panic seized her. She was trapped. The van in front of her remained motionless. The vehicle behind idled menacingly. Her GPS, which had gone silent, suddenly spoke again, its tone flat and certain. Destination on left. She looked to a left. There was nothing but a rusted barbed wire fence and a field of tall, dead corn stalks. Then, the van's passenger door opened. A man got out. He didn't look at her. He walked to the fence, pulled up a loose section of wire, and gestured for her to drive through the field. Every cell in Lena's body screamed in protest. This was a trap. The GPS had led her into a trap. She looked at her phone, desperately pressing the home button. The screen remained black, dead despite being plugged in. The man by the fence took a step toward a car. Lena made a decision. She threw the car into drive, wrenched the wheel to the right, and stomped on the accelerator. Her car shot forward, not onto the gravel track, but off the road, bouncing violently through the shallow ditch. She heard the undercarriage scrape against the earth, but the sedan kept going, plowing through the rough grass of the roadside embankment. She didn't look back. She just drove, aiming for the distant lights of a farmhouse she could see maybe a mile away across the field. In her rearview mirror, she saw the two sets of headlights still sitting on the road, not following. She made it to the farmhouse and pounded on the door until a frightened-looking elderly man answered. She called the police from his landline. The deputies who responded found the stretch of County Road 17 empty. They found her tire tracks in the ditch, but no sign of a van or another car. When they plugged the phone into a charger at the station, it powered up normally. Her GPS history showed the route she had taken, but the final turn into the field was listed as route incomplete. Lena never used a GPS again. She uses paper maps. She tells everyone that technology can be manipulated, that signals can be hijacked. She doesn't know who the men in the van were, or what they wanted, but she knows with a chilling certainty that her navigation app hadn't malfunctioned. It had been compromised, leading her to a destination chosen by someone else, for a purpose she can only dread to imagine. Story 6. I always thought doppelgangers were just a ghost story. Then I met mine on a rainy highway, and she was trying to steal my life. Finn's shift at the data center ended at 4 a.m. The drive home was his time to decompress, a 45-minute cruise on a sparsely populated interstate. The rain that night was a steady, hypnotic drumbeat on his roof. He was in the right lane, his speed a constant 68 miles per hour, following the familiar red taillights of a semi-truck a quarter-mile ahead. That's when he saw the hitchhiker. A figure stood under an overpass, half shrouded in shadow and spray from the road. As his headlights swept past, the details registered with unnatural clarity. It was a man. He wore a dark blue jacket, jeans, and a black backpack. And he had Finn's face. It was him. The same sharp jawline, the same slightly too long brown hair, the same stance. It was like seeing his own reflection in a window, but standing separate and whole. Finn's foot slipped off the accelerator in shock. He stared into the rearview mirror, but the figure was already swallowed by the darkness and rain. His heart hammered against his ribs. A trick of the light, he told himself. Exhaustion. He'd been staring at screens for 12 hours. He drove on, trying to shake the eerie feeling. 10 minutes later, he saw the car. It was his exact make, model, and color, a silver Toyota Corolla. It was parked on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking a slow, lazy rhythm. And standing beside the driver's side door, looking straight at him as he passed, was the hitchhiker himself. The double raised a hand, not in a wave, but a slow, deliberate gesture of recognition. Finn floored it. He swerved around the parked doppelganger and its car, his own Corolla shuddering as he pushed it to 90. This was no coincidence. This was something hunting him. He called 911, his voice cracking as he tried to explain to the dispatcher that he was being followed by himself. The dispatcher, understandably skeptical, told him to pull over at the next well-lit area and wait for a unit. The next exit was for a truck stop. Finn took it, his tires squealing on the wet ramp. He pulled into the brightly lit complex, parking directly under a floodlight near the main building. He sat there, shaking, watching the entrance ramp. A minute later, the silver Corolla appeared. It drove slowly through the truck stop, as if searching. It passed under a light, and Finn saw the driver clearly. It was him. The same tired eyes, the same 5 o'clock shadow. The double's gaze swept across the parking lot, passed directly over Finn's car, and moved on. It was as if he couldn't see his own vehicle sitting right there. The doppelganger parked on the far side of the lot, near the diesel pumps. Finn watched, paralyzed, as his double got out, stretched, and walked toward the main building, moving with Finn's own familiar, slightly slouched gait. This was his chance. While the thing was inside, he could get the license plate. He could prove this was real. He opened his door and stepped out into the rain, his eyes locked on the other Corolla. He was 10 feet away when he saw it. Sitting on the passenger seat of the doppelganger's car was a black backpack, and tucked into the side mesh pocket was a security badge for the data center where Finn worked. The photo on the badge was his own. The doppelganger wasn't just copying his appearance, it was copying his life. It was on its way to his job. Finn ran back to his car and sped away. He didn't wait for the police. He drove straight home, packed a bag, and checked into a motel 50 miles away. He quit his job by email the next morning. He never saw the doppelganger again. But sometimes he wonders, did it give up, or did it simply succeed? He imagines it sliding into his life, doing his job, seeing his friends, and no one ever noticing the difference. He changed his appearance, grew a beard, and moved to a new city. The fear never left him. Because the horror wasn't that a monster was chasing him. The true horror was the realization that he was so utterly replaceable, and that something out there knew it. Story 7. You never think about the spaces between places, the blank spots on the map. I learned the hard way that those spots aren't blank, they're just waiting. Jenna was a long-haul trucker, and I-80 through Wyoming was her second home. She knew every mile, every climb, every runaway truck ramp. The vast rolling emptiness was a comfort, but on this run, a late spring blizzard had blown in, turning the familiar highway into a white-knuckle gauntlet of howling wind and zero visibility. She crawled along at 30-mile-per-hour, her high beams reflecting off the swirling snow, creating a dizzying tunnel of white. Her CB radio, usually crackling with the chatter of other drivers, was silent. The storm had chased everyone else off the road or into truck stops. She was alone. Then, through the static, a voice broke through, faint and shredded by interference. "Anyone need help? Exit 247. The voice was gone as quickly as it came. Jenna checked a GPS. Exit 247 wasn't a town. It was a scenic overlook, a pull-off to nowhere. No services for 30 miles in either direction. A prickle of unease ran down her spine. Why would someone be offering help from there? 10 minutes later, the voice returned. Clearer this time. A man, his tone calm but insistent. "Northbound driver in the white Freightliner. You're struggling. I can see you. Take exit 247. I have fuel, coffee. You won't make it to the next stop." Jenna's blood went cold. "I can see you." She scanned the whiteness outside. Nothing. No taillights, no shapes. How could he see her? And how did he know her rig was white? It was impossible to see color in this storm. She keyed her mic. "Who is this? What's your 20? Static was her only reply. She pushed on, her hands clenched on the wheel. The offer was a trap. It had to be. But the voice returned, again and again, every 5 minutes, a relentless, soothing pressure. "Your engine is sounding rough, Jenna. You're low on fuel. I can help." He knew her name. It was on her truck's cab, but no one could read that in this weather. A cold terror, deeper than the storm outside, took root in her gut. This wasn't a fellow trucker. This was something that knew things it shouldn't. "Just take the exit, Jenna. It's safe here. The storm can't touch you here." The exit sign for 207 appeared like a ghost in the snow, a green rectangle being swallowed by the blizzard. As she passed it, she glimpsed a single hazy yellow light in the overlook parking lot. A single vehicle, its shape indistinct. She drove on, her heart hammering. The voice didn't return. For 20 minutes there was only the roar of the storm and the frantic beating of her own heart. Then, a new sound joined the symphony. A sputter from her engine. Her fuel gauge, which had read a quarter tank, was now dipping into the red. It was impossible. She had hundreds of miles left. The engine coughed again, a death rattle. Panic seized her. She was going to be stranded in the killing cold, a sitting duck. The exit 247 was the last one she'd passed. As if reading her thoughts, the CB crackled to life one final time. The man's voice was no longer soothing. It was flat, final. "You should have stopped when you had the chance, Jenna." The engine died. The truck coasted to a silent, snow-buried stop on the shoulder. The world outside was a roaring, white void. Jenna grabbed her phone. No signal. She was alone in the heart of the storm, and something out there in the white knew her name. She never found out if her fuel line had frozen, or if something else had siphoned her tank dry. All she knew was that the blank spaces on the map had been watching her all along, and tonight, they had decided to call her by name. Story 8. They say you can't outrun your past. I found out you can, but it has a funny way of finding you in the places you feel safest. Leo's escape was a 1973 VW camper van named Sunny. After his divorce, he'd sold everything that wouldn't fit inside it and pointed its nose west, chasing the freedom of the open road. For months, it was perfect. He surfed in California, hiked in Utah, found peace in the rhythm of waking up with the sun in a new beautiful place every few days. The trouble started in Oregon. He was parked for the night in a designated national forest campground, a lovely isolated spot at the end of a gravel road. He was making dinner on his camp stove when he saw it. A small wooden bird figurine carved with rough simplistic features sitting on a tree stump 20 feet from his van. It was odd, but he assumed a previous camper had left it. The next morning it was gone. He thought nothing of it until 2 days later at a different campground hundreds of miles away in Washington. As he was leveling his van, he saw the same wooden bird. It was sitting on a picnic table at the empty site next to his. The same size, the same rough carving. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Coincidence was no longer a plausible explanation. He picked it up. The wood was smooth, worn. It felt old. He threw it deep into the woods. The following week, in Idaho, he saw it again. This time it was perched on his own side view mirror when he woke up. Leo's peaceful escape shattered. He wasn't being followed by a person, he was being followed by a thing, a silent, inanimate object that defied logic. He stopped camping in forests. He started staying in Walmart parking lots, truck stops, any place with people and lights. For a week, there was no sign of the bird. He began to relax, telling himself it had been a bizarre series of events, a prank maybe. Then, in a crowded rest area in Montana, he saw a woman, probably in her 60s, with long gray hair and a worn backpack. She was standing by the trash cans, watching him. And in her hand, she held the wooden bird. Their eyes met. She didn't smile. She simply raised the bird, looked directly at him, and then placed it carefully on the ground before turning and walking away into the tree line. Leo didn't follow her. He got in his van and drove, his hands shaking. This was beyond strange. This was targeted. He drove through the night, pushing Sunny harder than he ever had, putting hundreds of miles between him and that rest area. Exhausted, he pulled into a 21-hour laundromat in a small North Dakota town just after dawn. He needed to wake up to feel normal. He sat on a hard plastic chair, the thrum of dryers a comforting sound. He closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them, the wooden bird was sitting on the folding table directly in front of him. Leo didn't scream. He didn't run. A strange calm settled over him. He picked up the figurine. It was just a piece of wood, but it was a message he could no longer ignore. He was done running. He still lives in that North Dakota town. He sold Sunny and rented a small apartment with a clear view of the street. He works a normal job and comes straight home. He never goes camping. The wooden bird sits on his windowsill. He doesn't know who the woman was or what she wanted, but he understands the message now. The road doesn't grant freedom, it just provides more places for the things you're running from to find you, and sometimes they don't even need to chase you. They just know the route better than you do. Story 9. I was a travel nurse. I thought I was bringing healing to small towns. I didn't know I was just another temporary resident in a place that had been practicing a much older kind of medicine. My assignment was in Hebron, a town so small it barely qualified for a dot on the Kansas map. The community clinic was a repurposed house, and I was to be the sole medical professional for 3 months. The locals were polite but distant, their gazes lingering a moment too long. The town had a quiet, almost rehearsed quality, as if everyone was playing a part. The oddities started small. Patients would refuse to give their full names, insisting I call them Mr. Smith or Miss Annie. They would bring me homemade poultices and teas, asking me to bless them alongside the antibiotics I prescribed. I chalked it up to rural superstition. Then came the case of the Miller boy. He had a deep, infected cut on his hand. I cleaned it, stitched it, and put him on a strong course of antibiotics. 2 days later, his mother brought him back. The wound was worse, swollen and angry, with a strange, blackened tinge at the edges. It was medically impossible. The soil here is stubborn, Mrs. Miller said, her voice flat. It doesn't always let go of what's its. That night I found a small, woven basket on the porch of my rented cottage. Inside was a bundle of dried herbs and a piece of paper with the boy's name written on it in a shaky, old-fashioned script. There was no note, no explanation. Driven by a mix of frustration and a creeping dread, I took the basket to the town's only pharmacist, an elderly man named Walter who had been there for 50 years. I showed him the herbs and the name. He grew very still. "You should not have taken that, Clara," he said, using my first name for the first time. "That was for the soil, to balance the taking." "The taking of what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're here to heal," he said, meeting my eyes. "But this land, it requires a balance. For every sickness you cure, for every life you extend, something else must be given back to the soil. An offering. That basket was for the Miller boy, to pay for the health you gave him." The world tilted. I was no longer a healthcare worker. I was a participant in some archaic, terrifying transaction I didn't understand. The town's distance, the refusal to give names, it wasn't superstition, it was protection. They didn't want the land to know who was receiving the gift of health, for fear of what it would take in return. I looked at Walter in horror. "What happens if the offering isn't made?" He just shook his head. "The land collects its due, usually from the one who was healed. Sometimes," he added, his gaze finally meeting mine, "from the healer who disturbed the balance." I left Hebron that night. I broke my contract, packed my car in the dark, and never looked back. I received a formal reprimand from the agency for abandoning my post. I didn't care. I changed my specialty and now only work in large, anonymous city hospitals. I never speak of Hebron. But sometimes, when a patient with a simple infection takes a sudden, inexplicable turn for the worse, I remember the blackened edges of the Miller boy's wound. And I wonder if I didn't just run away from that town, but if I brought a little piece of its hungry soil out with me, still waiting for the balance to be restored. Story 10. I used to believe in signs, literal kind, pointing you toward gas, food, and lodging. Now I know some signs aren't suggestions, they're instructions. The cross-country drive for my new job was supposed to be a fresh start. I left a messy life behind in Ohio, and the empty stretches of Texas highway felt like a cleansing. My old sedan was packed to the roof, my coffee was hot, and the sun was setting in a spectacular blaze of orange. I was making good time, aiming for a motel in a town called Dry Springs. That's when I saw the first sign. It was old, the green paint bleached pale by the sun. It read, "All travelers. Next services, 200 miles, last chance for fuel." My gauge showed half a tank. 200 miles was pushing it, but manageable. I pulled into the next exit, a single dusty gas station with a flickering neon sign that simply said, "Open." The attendant was a gaunt man who moved with a slow, deliberate economy. He didn't speak as he filled my tank. When I went to pay, he looked at me, his eyes deeply sunken. "You see the signs," he said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. "The one for fuel," I replied. He shook his head slowly. "Not that one. The other ones. You'll see 'em. Best do what they say." He took my money and turned away, the conversation clearly over. Back on the highway, a chill had settled in the car that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. An hour later, as full darkness fell, I saw the next sign. It was smaller, reflective white on black, like a roadwork warning. "Night drivers use high beams." It seemed odd, but I complied. The empty highway lit dot, a tunnel through the oppressive darkness. 20 minutes later, another sign. "Do not stop. Do not pick up hitchhikers." My knuckles tightened on the wheel. The road was utterly deserted. Who would be out here? And then I saw him. A lone figure standing under the next overpass, his thumb out. My high beams caught him perfectly. He was dressed in a suit, carrying a briefcase, his face a pale oval. As I shot past, I saw his head turn, his eyes follow my car with an unnerving intensity. I checked my mirror. He was gone. There was nowhere for him to go. The signs came more frequently now, their commands growing more specific, more bizarre. Ingoing road noises. As soon as I read it, I became aware of a rhythmic thumping sound, like something caught in my wheel well. I gripped the wheel, my heart pounding, and didn't stop. "Your phone has no signal. Do not check it." I glanced at my phone on the passenger seat. The screen was dark. I hadn't touched it for hours. The final sign was the worst. It was hand-painted on a piece of warped wood, nailed to a fence post. "It can see your fear. Drive normal." Tears welled in my eyes. Drive normal. How? I was trembling, my breath coming in short gasps. I forced my shoulders down, tried to regulate my breathing, and focused on keeping a steady speed. I drove like that for an eternity. a scream building in my chest that I didn't dare let out. The first lights of Dry Springs were the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. As I passed the city limits sign, the tension broke. I sobbed with relief. I pulled into the first motel I saw and collapsed in the room. In the morning, in the sane light of day, I went to the front desk to ask the clerk about the signs. I described them, my voice still shaky. The clerk, a young woman, gave me a puzzled look. "There aren't any signs like that out on the interstate, ma'am. Just the standard fuel and food placards. You must have been real tired." I didn't argue. I just got back in my car and drove the final stretch to my new life. I never saw another strange sign. But sometimes when I'm driving at night on a lonely road, I'll see a standard warning sign, bump or deer crossing, and my heart will seize. Because for a split second, my brain doesn't see the official text. It sees a different message, painted just for me, a reminder that I only made it because I obeyed. Story 11. They tell you to keep an emergency kit in your car. They never tell you what to do when the emergency isn't a flat tire, but a place that doesn't want you to leave. My sister Chloe and I were driving back from a failed music festival in New Mexico. The car was silent, the buzz of disappointment replaced by a throbbing headache. To save time, I took a shortcut my GPS suggested, a thin gray line cutting through a sprawling forest. The pavement quickly turned to gravel, and then to hard-packed dirt. The trees closed in, their branches scraping the roof like skeletal fingers. "We should turn around," Chloe mumbled, staring out the window. "I will. Just need to find a spot," I said. But the road was a narrow gully with no turnoffs. My phone signal had died 10 minutes ago. The GPS now showed our car as a blue dot floating in a featureless beige void. That's when we saw the trailer. It was an old Airstream, polished to a dull silver, parked in a small clearing. It looked pristine, utterly out of place in the decaying wilderness. A wisp of smoke curled from a small chimney pipe. Parked beside it was a vintage pickup truck, spotless and gleaming. "Someone lives out here?" Chloe whispered, her voice full of disbelief. As we passed, the trailer's door swung open. A man stepped out. He was handsome, clean-shaven, and wore a crisp flannel shirt and jeans. He smiled and waved, a friendly, normal gesture that felt like a hallucination. He started walking toward the road, toward us. I didn't stop. I accelerated, the car lurching over the ruts. I checked the rearview mirror. The man was still standing there, his smile unchanged, his hand still raised in a frozen wave. He didn't look angry or surprised. He looked patient. We drove for another hour. The forest looked the same in every direction. The gas gauge was dipping toward empty. The sky, visible in patches through the dense canopy, was beginning to darken. And then we saw it again. The clearing, the Airstream, the pickup truck. The same man was now sitting in a folding chair by a small fire. He saw us, stood up, and gave the same friendly wave, as if we were expected guests arriving right on time. "No," Chloe breathed. "No, no, no. This is impossible." I turned the car around, my tires spinning in the soft earth, and sped back the way we came. Panic was a live wire in the car. We didn't speak, just watched the identical trees flash by. The light faded from the sky. When the headlights caught the silver Airstream for the third time, I almost screamed. This time, the man was standing in the middle of the road. He wasn't waving. He was holding a red gasoline can. He gestured to it, then to our car, his smile benevolent. He knew we were almost out of gas. I slammed on the brakes, stopping a dozen feet from him. We sat there, the engine idling, locked in a silent standoff. He took a step forward. "Don't you dare," Chloe said to me, her voice cracking. I made a desperate three-point turn right there on the narrow track, branches screeching against the doors. I drove away from him, back into the heart of the forest, until the engine sputtered and died. We were out of gas. We were trapped. We spent the night in the car, too terrified to sleep, listening to the sounds of the forest. Just before dawn, we saw headlights approaching. It was the vintage pickup. It pulled out alongside us. The man rolled down his window. He still looked clean, well-rested, and friendly. "Out of gas?" he asked, his voice pleasant. "I figured you might be. Come on back to the trailer. I've got coffee on. You can use my phone." We never did see his phone. We've been here for 3 years now. The coffee is always on, the fire is always warm, He's the perfect host. We have everything we need, except a way out. Sometimes at night, we see other headlights winding through the trees. We try to wave them away, to warn them, but they always just wave back, thinking we're being friendly. They haven't learned yet. This forest isn't a place you pass through. It's a place you stay. Story 12. I was a logistics planner. I believed in efficiency, in the most direct route from A to B. My trip through Pennsylvania was meant to be a testament to that belief. I didn't account for the roads that aren't on the map, the ones that believe in a different kind of efficiency. It was the rain again, a cold, relentless downpour that blurred the world into shades of gray. My carefully planned route was blocked by a washed-out bridge, detouring me onto winding back roads that snaked through the Allegheny foothills. The GPS was useless, its digital voice calmly instructing me to make turns onto roads that were clearly abandoned decades ago. Frustrated and tired, I took a chance on a road that looked newly paved, a smooth black ribbon cutting through the dense, dripping woods. It was a relief after the potholes. There were no signs, no lane markings, just this perfect, empty road. I accelerated, grateful for the easy driving. After 10 minutes, I noticed the reflectors, small, silver circles embedded in the asphalt at regular intervals. But they weren't reflecting my headlights back to me. They were glowing with their own faint, internal greenish light. I slowed down. That was impossible. I pulled over and got out in the rain to look at one. It was cool to the touch, and the green glow pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. A deep unease settled over me. This wasn't a normal road. I got back in the car and continued, but now I was looking for a way off. Every side road I passed was overgrown, blocked by fallen trees, or simply ended in a wall of earth a few feet in. This road was a funnel. There were no exits. The trees began to thin, replaced by strange, geometric mounds of dark earth covered in a low, purple moss. The air itself felt different, thicker, and the sound of my engine became muffled, as if the road was absorbing the noise. Then I saw the toll booth. It was a modern, automated booth, lit by a harsh white light, standing alone in the middle of nowhere. The digital sign above the lane read, "Toll make you 8 hours." My blood ran cold. 8 hours? Of what? I inched forward. There was no coin basket, no ticket machine, just a sleek, black panel with a single, illuminated green handprint. I thought about backing up, but when I looked in my rearview mirror, the road behind me was gone. Not dark, but gone. Replaced by the same strange, moss-covered mounds that now flanked the road ahead. I was trapped. My phone was dead. My watch had stopped. I had no choice. With a trembling hand, I reached out and pressed my palm against the cool, black panel. A sharp, electric jolt shot up my arm. It wasn't painful, but it was profoundly draining. A wave of exhaustion hit me so hard I slumped over the wheel. I felt like I'd just lived a full day in a single second. The panel glowed blue and the toll gate arm lifted. I drove through, my body heavy, my mind fogged. The road eventually curved and deposited me back onto a familiar state highway. The rain had stopped. The sun was coming up. I made it to my destination, but I was a wreck. I slept for 16 hours straight. When I finally checked the time and date, I realized something that made me sick. I had lost exactly 8 hours. From the moment I turned onto that black road to when I emerged on the highway, an entire night had vanished. I never found the road on any map. I've tried to tell a few people, but they just think I fell asleep at the wheel. I know what I experienced. I paid a toll, not in money, but in time. And I have this lingering fear that I didn't just lose those 8 hours. I have this strange new mole on my palm, right where I pressed it against that panel. It's small, and it glows with a faint greenish light in the dark. I think it's a receipt. And I'm terrified that one day, on another lonely road, another toll booth will appear, and it will ask for a much larger payment. Story 13. I always took pride in my sense of direction. They say men never ask for directions. I was the exception. I loved knowing exactly where I was. That confidence evaporated somewhere between Ely and Tonopah, on a road that insisted I was someone else. The desert was playing tricks with the light, the long shadows of evening making every Joshua tree look like a twisted sentinel. I was on a state highway, the only car for miles, when I saw the first sign. It was an old, sun-bleached billboard. In peeling paint, it showed a smiling family and the words, "Welcome back, David! We've missed you!" A strange message, but I assumed it was a quirky local thing. Maybe a David owned the only gas station for 100 miles. I drove on. 10 minutes later, another sign, this one newer. "Almost home, David." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. My name isn't David. I checked my mirrors. Empty road. I was alone. The desert stretched out, vast and indifferent. Another sign, a simple roadside placard. "Turn left at the junction, David. Mom's making your favorite." My hands were slick on the wheel. This wasn't a coincidence. The signs were talking to me. To a me that wasn't me. The junction was just ahead. The left fork was a dirt track, disappearing into a canyon. The right fork continued on the paved highway. My GPS, which had been silent, suddenly spoke in its calm electronic voice. "Recalculating. Proceed left." I didn't. I stayed on the pavement, my heart hammering. The sign stopped. For 20 minutes there was nothing but the hum of my tires and the setting sun. I started to breathe easier. It had been a prank, a bizarre series of coincidences. Then I saw the car. An old box sedan parked sideways in the middle of the road, completely blocking it. A man was leaning against the driver's side door, his arms crossed. As I slowed to a stop, he pushed himself off the car and walked toward me. He was in his 50s, with a kind, weathered face, but his eyes were intense. He knocked on my window. I rolled it down an inch. "David," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You finally came home." "I'm not David," I said, my voice trembling. "Don't tea like that, son. Your mother, she's been waiting." He gestured behind him, down the road. "It's just a little further. We've kept your room just how you left it." The sincerity in his voice was more terrifying than any threat. He genuinely believed I was his son. I looked past him. The road behind his car was empty. I could reverse, but I was miles from anywhere. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my dead phone as a bluff. His face fell, a mask of profound sadness. "Please, David, don't make that hard. We just want you to come home." I saw my chance. I threw the car into reverse, spun the wheel, and executed a frantic three-point turn, my tires kicking up dust. I sped back the way I came, watching my mirror. The man didn't chase me. He just stood there, a lonely figure growing smaller, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I drove all night, stopping until I hit Las Vegas. I never reported it. What would I say? That a man in the desert mistook me for his son? But the fear hasn't left me, because I've started having dreams of a room I've never seen, with trophies on a shelf for sports I never played. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I don't see my own reflection for a split second. I see a stranger named David, and he looks so tired. I think a part of me stayed on that road, or maybe a part of David came back with me.